Hello, everyone, and welcome to our CESI Talks. CESI Talks is a series of debates that aim to enhance public dialogue on issues related to employment and social policies. Today, we're really pleased to have with us MEP Mrs. Delbos-Corfield. Gwendoline, thank you for being with us.
Hello.
She's part of the group of the Greens and Europeans Free Alliance, and she's also a member of the Committee on Women's Rights and Gender Equality, which we are going to talk about today. So CESI Talks is in the frame of a CESI European Parliament co-founded project, which is called We EP24. And we have this kind of talks to engage with the general public on their expectation regarding the EU elections. And therefore, we're talking about the European Parliament priorities on employment, as well as digital, green policies, and of course, gender equality policies. So Mrs. Delbos-Corfield, I'm going to ask a first question on the directive of pay transparency. How will this directive combat pay discrimination and help close the gender pay gap?
Well, it's quite simple. It's for the first time at such a big framework. So all EU, there will be the obligation for companies to disclosure how much they pay their salaries, their employees, and to explain if differences are seen, and so that will be available for trade unions. It will be available, of course, for all of the employees, and it will mean that if you find that you have not the same pay as your colleague, while you are doing exactly the same job, and you arrived at the same time in the company, and there's nothing that seems wrong, you can go to your boss and say, why are we not paid the same? And maybe people don't realize it. Those that are not discriminated often don't realize it, but those that are discriminated know it very well. In fact, there is difference that has no rational criteria behind. So today, a woman, for example, is still paid 13% less than a man for an hour. But we also know that, for example, someone of color sometimes won't be paid the same as his colleague in the same job just because of discrimination. So this is the purpose. It's an obligation. It will oblige companies to explain what salaries they give and why. And it won't. And because of that transparency, people will be able to argue, to ask for more, and also to go to justice and then say, if it's not happening, why am I not paid in the same way? This is discrimination.
Thank you. And remaining on the topic of directives, there's also the directive on gender balance in corporate boards. Can you tell us a little bit more about the significance and also the weaknesses that we might encounter in this directive?
So like the pay transparency one, it's a long overdue directive. So we were happy on that point of view. So it's a directive that is requesting there again companies, when they have board, so a place where policy decisions for the company are made, that they have at least a third of these people being women. We know that women are very few in high level places in economy. So on that point of view, it's a first step. But as I said, it was decided ages ago. It never was done. We never went through on the pay transparency directive. When we finally managed to get it as a legislation, because it wasn't blocked anymore by the council, we got a very good legislation. Things had improved even since the last decisions. We got even more obligation for the companies. With the number of employees that a business has to have to be in the system is lower. So we had improvement. On this directive, there was no improvement since 2012. It was voted as it is. So this is a bit of a disappointment. It has an impact, of course, because we know it is important for females, people to have people they can look upon to think, oh, I could become that. We know that scientists, girls that wanted to do science are happy to have scientist model. We know that people that want to be artists are happy to see artists as model. It's the same if you want to be in economy. It's good to have empowered women that are class model. But that being said, the other thing where we might make a remark is that this is really a directive that is targeting only a certain part of women. basically today, sadly, white, educated women. So for me, this has much less impact than the other directive. It's also a bit of a feminism for rich sort of thing. It is important, but it's much less important than the other one, and much less important than everything that we can do in the next years about everyday life for gender, everyday life with intersectional criteria, and that we have in mind that we also care about those women with a number of other added discrimination, that only being a woman. That's why we talk about intersectionality. These women that are in badly paid jobs, partial time jobs, really exploited. We also have a number of rules for them, because if we only target the situation for the easy ones, it's going to be very sad for all of the others.
Of course, and from what you're seeing right now, as we know, gender equality has been a long battle it is a never-ending battle that we need to fight for. And also we need to be vigilant, because the more we go on, the more sometimes discrimination becomes very subtle and harder to tackle. So it is important that we're all working in it. And talking about the European Parliament as a role model of other institutions and organizations, do you think it could be the European Parliament a role model for other organizations in this regards?
Yes, it is already, to be honest, because for two reasons. The first one is today we have a parliament with 40% of women. It's still not half of the parliament. It's not more than half, which we could also imagine one day, but it is still much better than most of the parliament in EU, much better. So this is first thing. The second thing is that for ages, for decades now, this European Parliament has had this specific committee, the FEM committee on rights for women and gender equality, that has been putting inputs in all of the policies of the Parliament. So it has been a role model for a long time. But now it's going to be even more, because we have really putting in place a gender mainstreaming work all over the place, which means that we're not only tackling the representation, so the usual thing we always think about, having as many women as men and powerful places, but we're also going into much more finer details that say a lot. The topics. Women will be very much present on topics like social affairs, family affairs, civil liberties, which is very important, but still we will not have as many women in economy committee, but we won't also have as many women in agriculture committee, in a number of these hard work structural committees for the parliament. Where you have the most money going out of European Union, for example, the CAP, the money for agriculture, there you have much less women involved. So this is important, that the representation, balanced representation, is not only a general one, but in each committee. Then we will be working also at looking at the reports themselves, because there again, we can think that there is equality, but there's not. In this parliament still today, the big reports, the structurally important reports, the big climate plans, the big economical plans, the big agricultural plans, they're in the hands of male rapporteurs. So there again, we are saying, we need a balance here. We need a balance in the chairings of the groups, mostly men chairing groups or places of power. So we are going into all of these little details to understand where women are. We cannot be just satisfied there's 40% women and that's it. It's much more subtle than that, to go and see where exactly the power lies and if the women are in these places. And most of the time we realize that, in fact, even if we have more representation of women in this parliament, they are not where the power is. So that's the interesting thing. So on this, we are doing something that is quite new, has never been seen elsewhere. We are also going to the groups to ask them to work on this and tackle this issue. So we're also going into the difficult political things. So yes, I think on that point of view, it will be important. It's important. Maybe people don't realize it's important because it has an influence on how policies are made. Of course, when you're a politician, you should be working for the general interest. And I think that we all, most of all, have this in mind. But the thing is, when you don't know a situation, when you don't have a perspective, you you cannot be able to put it in your policy. And the fact that women have not been in certain places has often meant that policies were made for men. The recovery plans that this European Union have just made to help countries go through the economical crisis after COVID. So there were all of these recovery plans. These recovery plans will be putting a lot of investment and money in very male sectors, dominated economical sectors. There's no money foreseen, for example, for all of the care sector where all the women are. So if these policies had been thought with more women around the table, it probably would have less been the case. We see this also for energy question, for environmental question. If we don't do this, at the very end, we will have new policies and directives coming in that will be discriminating against women, even when we don't want to, on very different topics, going from agriculture to energy, just because the woman perspective was not in it. The gender perspective, we should say, even more than the woman, the gender perspective was not in it, like the intersectional. So gender mainstreaming is really important for our policies to be in the interest of every citizen.
Absolutely. As you said, I think each group of the society, women and men, need to be together in order to strive. And so we should not be left behind. So thank you very much for all of the hard work that it's going on at the European Parliament. And I hope it goes on. And thank you, everybody, for watching. And I hope to have another interview with you soon.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thank
Good
you.
luck.